And hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Backstage Podcast. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate that you're here because evidently I haven't been that consistent. I know that I told you that I'd make an effort in producing more of these solo episodes last year, and I was doing pretty fine. I took a little bit of an absence during the Christmas break, and then, quite honestly, forgot to come back. So sorry about that. It took longer than I thought. But we're back, kicking it off right where we left off. And I want to jump on here and do an episode on the up-and-coming by-election in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne. Now, obviously, this, for most, may be a very boring episode because nobody really cares about by-elections in Quebec or anywhere for that matter. But this by-election in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne is a quite special one, and we'll go over the reasons in this episode, and why this by-election will actually attract a lot more attention than they usually do. I have a feeling that as of today, February the 6th, all the way until March 13th, which is the actual date of the election, I have a feeling that the media will be pretty active in covering this campaign. So we're going to get to it right away. Now, just for those wondering why this by-election may be different from what we're used to, very simple, because in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne, for those who followed the program, and especially during the campaign, you will know that riding was the riding that belonged to Dominique Anglade. Dominique Anglade was the former leader of the Liberal Party here in Quebec. Before that, she was obviously a minister, deputy premier here in Quebec, so quite a prominent figure in Quebec's political scene. She stepped down after the last election in 2022 in October because her party completely flopped that election, really disastrous results, and she pretty much had no other choice than to resign, and that's what she did. So there's a by-election. Premier Legault announced it this morning. It'll be on the 13th of March. There are some candidates. We're going to go over some of the candidates, or at least three of the candidates that have already been presented to the electors in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne, and then we're just going to go over a few points on strategy and what will happen over the course of the next month, or a little over the month. So let's go over the candidates over here very quickly. So Quebec Solidaire has already announced their candidate. They were first to do so. Basically, it's the exact same candidate that ran the election in 2022. Very smart move on their behalf. So that's Guillaume Clich-Rivard, a young man, a lawyer, very intelligent, very well spoken, who has the experience already. He just did a whole general election over there. The residents in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne got to know him. He has a good presence on the ground. His team practically never even left. They've pretty much continued all the way through. So he's been almost continuously been campaigning since September of last year. So I think he has quite an advantage in that riding. The CAQ, Coalition Avenir Québec, the governing party, also announced their candidate, Victor Pelletier. Very young guy, 21 years old. He's the president of the CAQ's youth wing. Started his involvement in that party from a young age, from the age of 14, 15 years old. He started in that party. And he's also a political staffer. I think he's the political staffer for the M&A for Blainville, if I'm not mistaken, Mario Laframboise. So this is a guy from inside. They went and picked a candidate from their own political ranks, if you want, from the backstage of their party. And we're going to get back to this candidate and why I think that this is just a random nomination there for the CAQ. I don't think that they stand a chance, and I think they even know it. But we're going to get back to this later on. The PLQ this morning just announced their candidate, Christopher Benninger. Christopher Benninger is a guy that I know personally. I got to know him during the last campaign. He ran in Saint-Henri-Saint-Jacques against Manon Massé. Manon Massé is the co-leader of Quebec Solidaire, so he got to know her a little bit well. And he pretty much came from nowhere, let's be honest. He wasn't at all involved in politics. He's a complete rookie, complete newcomer in the political scene, at least in the last campaign. But he got bitten by the bug. He's very passionate about politics. This is someone that comes from the business world, the entrepreneurial world, very good communicator, but very little experience in politics. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, everyone at some point has or deserves a chance to run for office, whether you have experience or not. And he's demonstrated quite the ability and the desire to represent his constituents. But again, we're going to get back to all these nominations in a little bit. PQ, the Parti Québécois, no candidate yet. And the Conservative Party of Quebec, no candidate yet. Is that anything? I mean, does that mean anything? Are they giving any importance to this election? Will they present candidates? I want to believe that they will. It's difficult for me to imagine the PQ not presenting a candidate. I honestly would have thought that they would have done so already, especially since the end of the last campaign in October of 2022. The leader of the PQ, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, had a very good campaign. He got his name out there. He appealed a lot to Quebecers. He did a fantastic job. And ever since the last election, if there is one party that has seen somewhat of a significant kind of growth, not so sure if we can call it a momentum yet, but still seen much more favorably in the eyes of Quebecers, it is the Parti Québécois. And I thought that they would have just used that trampoline, if you will, to be first on the ground. We're still waiting for a candidate for the PQ. I really hope that they put a candidate in that riding. As for the Conservative Party of Quebec as well, I think it would be a big mistake to pass on this opportunity. The leader of the party, Éric Duhem, saw this huge wave of popularity right before the last election. He got record number in memberships, in fundraising. He did spectacularly well for the Conservative Party of Quebec. He got his name out there as well, and I think that it would benefit him as well as the party if he again continued, because that definitely was a momentum. We can definitely call that a momentum for the Conservative Party of Quebec, and I think it would be a huge mistake not to present a candidate over there. Whether or not they have a chance to win, that's irrelevant. I just think that he needs to remain relevant in the political ecosystem, even though, I mean, he's a leader of a political party. He's there anyway, but I do not think that he can afford to pass on this opportunity. I think it would be a big mistake. Let's get on to a few points now, why this election is important. I started this podcast off by saying that usually by-elections are insignificant. Nobody really cares about them. Traditionally, they have much lower voter turnout, which is probably going to happen in this election as well. But why is the media all over this election? Well, like I said before, this is the old riding of Dominique Anglade. It is a riding that the Liberal Party has held for a long time. I think ever since it was created. It's always been liberal. It is considered a fortress, but it's amazing what's happening, because in that part of Montreal, over the last couple of years, there has been this significantly growing number of support for Quebec Solidaire. There's that 20 to 40 demographic, the young students, the young families, young professionals that are that tend to be much more siding with this populist kind of ideology that Quebec Solidaire seems to be representing, and their base has shown to grow over the last couple of years, not only in that part of Montreal, but in other little pockets here and there in Montreal. That's definitely one area that Quebec Solidaire has been focusing on for a long time. They won in the neighboring riding of Verdun, so they picked up that riding. And during the last election in October, September to October, there was a lot of talk about the Liberals potentially losing that riding to Quebec Solidaire. So there was a huge involvement and effort put from Quebec Solidaire, from their quote unquote machine in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne. They didn't succeed last election, but it wasn't that big of a difference. I mean, we're talking about 2,700 votes majority. Normally, that is a comfortable-ish majority to win by. But again, let's be honest here. This was Dominique Anglade. She was known before politics, and when she came into politics, she was given almost immediately a post as a cabinet minister. She then became deputy premier. She became the leader of the party. So there was this notoriety around this person. There was this recognition and this competence around this individual. She wasn't a nobody, and she benefited from this support, right? So the Liberals don't have that now. Without taking anything away from Christopher Benninger, he isn't Dominique Anglade. He doesn't have that baggage that Dominique Anglade came with into politics. So it's not there. And in addition to that, it's a by-election. So automatically we know that there is going to be much less people going out to vote than they did in the last general election. So that 2,700 votes that Dominique Anglade won with, I'm not so sure that difference is going to remain this time around. So the Liberal Party needs to be very careful. They can't take anything for granted, and I know they don't. But at the same time, Quebec Solidaire really sees this as a huge opportunity for them to go and pick up this riding. There's a reason why this by-election is immensely important, both for the PLQ and Quebec Solidaire, and that goes back to what we were saying in some previous episodes about obtaining party status that Quebec Solidaire did not obtain. They were just one seat short of obtaining party status. So I'm not going to go over the reasons why it's important to obtain party status. You can go back and revisit those episodes. I went in with great detail on what it means to obtain party status, and unfortunately Quebec Solidaire did not. They spent a huge amount of time after the election negotiating with other parties on obtaining whatever amount of budget that they got. This time around, if they manage to win this riding, well, they will officially have party status. So obviously that means more money, and they need this seat. At the same time, the Liberals can't afford to lose any other seats. I mean, they already had an embarrassing result in the last elections. Immediately after the election, there was an MNA that defected from the party because of dissatisfaction that existed there with the party leader. Dominique Anglade had to resign. So not only did they lose that one seat where the MNA went and is sitting now independent, but Dominique Anglade decided to resign. So they cannot afford to lose another seat and fall under 19. I mean, right now they were at 20. They lost one MNA because she became independent, so they're down to 19. They don't want to drop lower than that. So they obviously want to save face. They're in a process right now, that party, of reconstructing, of revisiting their raison d'être, the reason why they exist, why things went wrong, what do we need to do in order to rebuild this party. Losing another seat is definitely something that shouldn't be on the agenda, right? I mean, it's going to come and cast a shadow on that whole effort of kind of boosting that party up again. There are, however, certain advantages now in this election, mostly for Quebec Solidaire. Will it be enough for them to win the election? I don't know. But that advantage, like I said earlier on, is with respect to this candidate having already done a general election. So the candidate, from what I understand, lives in the riding, campaigned in the riding, has spent an enormous time on the ground. And like I said, my guess is that Guillaume Clich-Rivard has taken very little time off. I don't think he even stopped campaigning after the election, assuming that they probably saw that Dominique Anglade may resign, or, I mean, I don't think it took a genius to kind of figure that thing out. So I doubt that he took any significant break on campaigning. So this guy over here, he's been just one continuous campaigning machine, right, in that riding. It's a huge advantage for him on the ground, especially with against the candidate that doesn't know the area as well, who has to start from scratch, basically, and who was announced literally the same day that the elections were launched. Had the Liberal Party announced this candidate immediately once Dominique Anglade had resigned, at least Christopher would have had, several weeks, if not months ahead to start working on the ground, which isn't the case. So he's literally starting from scratch on day one of this by-election. So there's a huge advantage over here that Quebec Solidaire has, in addition to what I said before about, that margin, that vote majority, not necessarily being the same this time around. I wonder, and I'm thinking out loud here on what the Liberal strategists are thinking, but I would seriously doubt that they're expecting to have the exact same vote results from the last campaign. I don't think it's going to happen. So I have a feeling that it's going to be much tighter than it was last time around, even though we can't really consider 2,700 votes a tight victory. I think Dominique Anglade won with a more or less comfortable majority, but that's not going to be around this time. So they need to take that seriously. The other advantage that there is in this campaign, and this is not for any particular candidate, but for all the candidates running in this election, is that, and this happens usually with every by-election, is that there's only one campaign. It's not 125 campaigns that we have in the general election, right? So there's only one riding to pick up, and the entire party machine is focused on that one election. So regardless of whether or not, the candidates running have experience or they don't, they know that they can count on a tremendous amount of support from their party and from their volunteers. So it's a completely different environment than a regular than a general election, where at least this time around there weren't that many resources available. And I'm talking specifically about the Liberal Party of Quebec. We saw that during the campaign, where they had trouble finding volunteers. They had trouble even finding candidates. So they weren't really having a good campaign last time around. This time with the by-election, all their efforts are focused in that one riding. So you're going to have all the M&As that are going to be called to help, their volunteers, their base, their staffers, even on the weekends or after 5 p.m. or whenever they have free time. There's going to be an incredible amount of people working in this campaign. And like I said, there's two parties that are really thirsty to win this campaign. So this is why I think it's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of people. It's going to feel like a real campaign, despite the fact that it's only a by-election. Now, I want to talk a little bit before we end the episode. I do want to talk a little bit about strategy over here, because very interestingly, the interim leader of the Liberal Party, Marc Tanguay, came out off the gate, right off the bat, criticizing Quebec Solidaire, specifically on Bill 96. Now, for those that may not know, Bill 96 is the new bill that was passed by the government. It's basically the new language bill that has created somewhat of an issue, especially in Montreal, where and in that riding in particular, where there is a quite important percentage of the population that is Anglophone. So that bill definitely has had or will have an impact in that district. But what I want to get to is that he was immediately criticized by the media and from a lot of commentators that I listened to or that I read about about what the point was. Do you really need to bring Bill 96 in this campaign? Is this really where you're focused on? And so he was, I'm not going to say heavily criticized, but he was criticized about taking perhaps the wrong approach. I disagree. I think that this approach is actually very intelligent, and I'll tell you why. Although I don't think that Bill 96 should be the primary strategy going into this campaign, because there's a lot more challenges in this riding, right? We're talking about challenges in housing, social, health and social services. This is a riding that has seen this tremendous boom in the last 10 to 15 years, where there's an incredible amount of businesses that started popping up and who in the last couple of years have suffered tremendously. So you have issues of employment and labor shortage. So there's a lot more serious issues than Bill 96, in my opinion. But the reason I think that the Liberals decided to come up swinging with Bill 96, I think there's something very intelligent behind that. Now, what Marc Tanguay said specifically, he came out to attack Quebec Solidaire, and he said specifically that Quebec Solidaire, when it comes to Bill 96, is like the CAQ. It's one and the same. They voted in favor of Bill 96. Obviously, Quebec Solidaire leader Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois came out and kind of played that down and said, we're going to have a very positive campaign. We're not going to spend our time necessarily answering and commenting on what the Liberals had to say. He kind of he was quick to push it aside, because I also think that he knows that line can have an impact on the result, and I'll explain why. There is a growing population, like I said, in that district that is supporting Quebec Solidaire. Okay, it's been growing for years, and that's why Quebec Solidaire has put a lot of energy in that riding. But there is a quite significant part of that population that is against Bill 96. Now, I don't know if that population voted initially for Quebec Solidaire. I don't know if they're in that age demographic. But whatever the case is, the fact that Marc Tanguay has brought that out initially from this campaign, I think what they're trying to do is to really draw the line and say, this is where we are camped and this is where Quebec Solidaire is camped. And if there's one thing in that particular riding that actually benefits both the Liberal Party and Quebec Solidaire, is that the majority of the population of Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne would probably not vote CAQ. It's not a riding that the CAQ could even hope to win, even though publicly they're going to come out and say, yeah, we're putting all our effort and we believe in our candidate and yes, we're going to win. I think deep down they know that they stand no chance in that riding. So knowing that the majority of your population will probably not be supporting the CAQ, if off the bat you are painting that image that Quebec Solidaire is like the CAQ, automatically I think you're in an advantage over here, which is why for the Liberals it's also essential that the PQ put a candidate, because they're probably counting on the fact that if we push that message that Quebec Solidaire on Bill 96 is the CAQ, they may very well be able to grab a lot of their electorate, or a significant part of their electorate, to swing back to the PQ, because there is a PQ base in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne. It's false to say that there isn't. If today the Quebec Solidaire numbers are as impressive as they are, it's because at some point or another, that electorate was voting Parti Québécois. So if the Liberals could sway a significant enough portion of Quebec Solidaire's vote towards the PQ, they may just have enough to pull it off in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne. So I think it's not necessarily a bad idea. I hope that they don't stick only on Bill 96, and I hope that they bring out their ideas on all the other issues that are equally as challenging in that riding. Now, a few people have commented, and I read that and I laughed out loud, and I hope I'm not wrong, because then obviously I'll look stupid here. But there are some commentators that said, this campaign can be so close between the Liberals and Quebec Solidaire that the CAQ might squeeze right through and pick this one up. I don't see that happening. I really don't see that happening. The CAQ, we're going to go back to this candidate that they chose. Every time you see a political party picking a candidate, a young candidate, someone from within the party, usually it's because, and I don't want to say that they don't care about winning the election or they don't care about this candidate. Obviously, they care about the candidate, but my experience has shown that usually when this is done, it's because they just need to fill the seat. They just need to put the posters up in the riding, and they just find pretty much anyone. And this youngster, raised his hand. Good for him. He's going to have a great experience doing this campaign. But I'm not ready to believe that the CAQ is serious about winning this campaign. Had the CAQ been serious about winning this campaign, my guess is that they would probably find maybe a candidate with a better profile, or maybe more experienced, a little bit older, that has something more to bring to the table. So that to me is an indication that the CAQ probably already knows that the chances are very weak for them to win in that riding. Which brings me also to the PLQ. And again, I don't want to take away anything from Christopher here, and he's probably going to watch this episode, and I hope he doesn't think that I'm critical towards him. I think he's great. I think he communicates well. I think he deserves to be at the National Assembly. I think he can, he has a lot to add. But at the same time, I'm still fascinated that the PLQ is having trouble finding, that A grade candidate that they were, they had the reputation of finding, maybe 5-10 years ago. And especially in a riding like this, where one, you don't want to lose, and two, it was the riding that belonged to a pretty prominent figure, not only in your party, but in general in Quebec politics, right? Dominique Anglade, like I said, she wasn't just anyone. And in the past, the Liberal Party had this incredible machine and this reputation of really being able to point their finger to the candidate and say, look what we went and got. Look who we went and recruited to run in this riding. And this always happened, especially in ridings that were considered safe ridings for the Liberal Party. They always had this reputation of finding high-profile individuals and putting them in these safe ridings in order to bring value to the caucus up in Quebec City. Again, not to take anything away from Christopher, but we are so far away the situation that we've been used to with the Liberal Party and today, where they are still struggling to attract these high-profile individuals. We saw that in the last campaign in 2022, where it took a couple of weeks in order for them to even fill up their slate of candidates, the 125. So there's definitely an issue there with the Liberal Party, and I think that they're focused so much on winning this because they cannot afford to take another shot in the ribs, right? I mean, they've had a couple of thorns on their sides for a while now, and a defeat in Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne is just going to come and just ruin any possible effort that is probably currently now being drawn up to bring back the party and to bring back that reputation and to stimulate it and to make it kind of the party that it was before. I think there's a lot of the members of this party are looking at this election to see exactly how the Liberal Party will perform. And I think it'll play a huge role in the coming months as the party gets into this procedure of kind of renewing and rebuilding. So I really hope that they pull it off for the sake of the party. At the same time, I'm very curious to see how Quebec Solidaire will perform. It's going to be an interesting campaign, and I know that both these parties are thirsty for this riding. They need this riding for their own credibility and for the benefit of their respective parties. It's going to be very, very interesting. Looking forward to how this campaign develops. March 13 is the election date, and before I sign off, just curious to know, and I've never done this for by-elections. I've only done this during general elections. I'm curious to know if you guys would be happy if I brought back the car ride conversations for this by-election. Let me know what you guys think. I'm willing to do it. Maybe get to know these candidates a little bit closer in a more personal setting. It'll be fun. I mean, I'm willing to do it. We'll see if the other parties bring or announce any candidates. So let me know if you think that I should bring back the car ride conversations for this for these elections. I'll be more than glad to do it. Having said that, thank you again for tuning in. Looking forward to continuing these solo episodes. Let me know what you think in the comments. Share the episodes. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and all audio platforms, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you all so very much. See you all on the next episode.